the Trump administration is beginning to implement this change in policy and is starting to truly execute on what I think a lot of people thought was just rhetoric, but is what used to be called in American strategic thinking hemispheric defense, the idea that we have this unique concern for the defense of the entire Western Hemisphere, broadly defined. And I think that's going to be the new way in which the United States under President Trump thinks about its national security challenges in the hemisphere.
Joining me now is the former Deputy Assistant to the President and Chief of Staff of the White House National Security Council, Alexander Gray. Evening, Alexander.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I mean, very, very serious times. We are all wondering about the implications of removing the president of a sovereign nation. It is what's happened. It's where we are now. What do you see happening next? Not just to Maduro, but of course to what's going to happen to Venezuela and the US's relationship with it.
Well, I think we have to start by seeing this the way the Trump administration sees it, which is as part of this new strategy that they're calling it the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, which holds that if you are an extra hemispheric power, so think Iran, China, Russia, and you are active in the Western Hemisphere, or you're a regime like Cuba, Nicaragua, Colombia, and you're actively working with any of those outside powers, the way the Venezuelans under Maduro were, you are posing a threat to U.S. national security. So I think what this tells me is the Trump administration is beginning to implement this change in policy and is starting to truly execute on what I think a lot of people thought was just rhetoric, but is what used to be called in American strategic thinking hemispheric defense, the idea that we have this unique concern for the defense of the entire Western Hemisphere, broadly defined. And I think that's going to be the new way in which the United States under President Trump thinks about its national security challenges in the hemisphere.
Now, I don't want to make it all about Britain, but on the back of what you've just said, the immediate thought is, what does that mean for Britain in Europe? Because I did hear one commentator suggest that if America is going to be concerned about what's happening in its own hemisphere, is it going to leave Europe to Russia?
Well, I think the way that the administration is thinking about it is that Russia is a power in decline. Russia is, for demographic reasons, for economic, military reasons, the war in Ukraine has revealed an extraordinarily weak and decaying Russian state. Russia poses a short-term threat to the United States and Europe, but I think the way the Trump administration sees it is that over the medium and long term, it's a threat that Europe itself can handle, particularly given the increased defense spending and capability increases Europe's undertaken in the last 4 years. So I don't think that from a European perspective, I would assume that the trajectory of American engagement in Europe is definitely going to be it'll be receding because the threat perception of Russia is one of a declining power.
And also, we probably need to pay for our own defence rather than relying on Americans to do it for us. So let's focus then on Venezuela. Now that the president has been removed, there is this very strange relationship between Delcy Rodriguez, who's been sworn in as the interim president, and Marco Rubio and the wider Trump administration. They've had conversations. The ball, I guess, is in her court when it comes to cooperation. What do you think the chances are that Venezuela is going to meekly comply, or the former Maduro regime is going to meekly comply with America's demands?
Well, I think the former Maduro regime, people like Delcy Rodriguez, like her brother, like some of the other key functionaries in the Maduro regime, they're trying to hold on to power. They've amassed extraordinary ill-gotten wealth from looting the economy, looting what was once the most profitable energy industry in the hemisphere. They have a lot to lose personally by getting more at odds with the Trump administration than they already are. My guess is what you're going to see is there will be some sort of interim leadership council made up of existing Chavez, Maduro regime elements that ultimately paves way for a transition to something more permanent over time. I think the political imperative from President Trump's perspective is he cannot, from a domestic U.S. political standpoint, engage in anything that looks like nation building. There will not be Iraq 2.0. And at the same time, as you heard him say, he does not want to just abandon Venezuela to its fate and allow there to be some sort of vacuum that leads us back to exactly where we were prior to Maduro. So he's got to do this balancing act between no nation building, not trying to pick and choose exactly what the future regime looks like, while also not being indifferent to what the immediate situation is in Caracas. So it's a difficult thing for him to balance. I think ultimately it's going to involve, probably to the disappointment of the Venezuelan opposition, significant early buy-in from people like Delcy Rodriguez, who have an incentive personally to be on the good side of the Americans, while at the same time the administration doesn't have anyone else to really turn to. The opposition is divided. No one in the opposition has run Venezuela for 25 years. They lack practical governing experience. So I think there's going to be an incentive for some sort of cooperation between the Maduro regime elements and the Trump administration.
We've had a number of texts in while you've been talking, quite angry about America's actions here. Marcus has said, hemispheric defense is colonialism in disguise, completely illegal under international law. All US companies who seek to exploit Venezuelan natural resources should lose their license to operate in Europe. Tracy has said, in my opinion, Trump's behavior displays the megalomania we associate with unhinged emperors from the classical world. And to expect the UK, in his eyes, tiny, malleable and insignificant, to have been notified of his intentions would have been laughable were the situation not so alarming. I mean, there is, in certain quarters, alarm at what Donald Trump has done. And I guess, you could react to those texts if you like, but also I'd put the question to you, why did the administration feel the need to act in the way it did now? What does it have to gain from it?
Well, so to react to it, and also what does the administration have to gain? The United States has never, whether it's Joe Biden or Donald Trump's either of his terms, recognized Nicolas Maduro as the legitimate leader of Venezuela. He has always been viewed as illegitimate. The Chavez regime was not viewed as legitimate. There has been a consistent American policy that, as you saw with the indictment in federal court, that he is a drug trafficker. He's a narcotics trafficker. He is not the elected leader of Venezuela. That is Maria Machado, the winner of the Nobel Prize. And the view has long been in Washington, regardless of whether it's Joe Biden or Donald Trump, that what Maduro is doing in Caracas is patently illegal, holding on to power against popular will, and that he is a narco trafficker who is in bed with Iran, China, Russia, and is actively destabilizing the hemisphere. So I think that is why Donald Trump acted the way he did. To the other points, to the comments that came in, look, I think there was a mention of American companies going in. I think it's important to note, if American companies go in to help revive the Venezuelan energy sector, it's going to be because PDVSA, the Venezuelan state oil company, was destroyed and looted by the Chavez and Maduro regimes over 25 years. It was one of the most successful energy companies in the world, and it's been destroyed, and it's going to take decades to bring it back to life, and only American and British and European expertise is going to be able to bring that oil industry back so the Venezuelan people can benefit from it.
Well, what about the argument that Trump's actions are destabilizing the world, that China and Russia will just look at what's happened and go, righto, then that gives us pretty much the green light to do whatever we want with impunity?
I think it's exactly the opposite. I think it's an incredibly powerful statement to the Chinese who are exercising around Taiwan and to the Russians as they look for future aggression in Eastern Europe, that the United States is restoring deterrence. I think I would disagree with that strongly. I think this is one of the most important messages Trump could send, that in our own backyard, where there is this type of threat, this type of blatant law breaking and thumbing your nose at American, long-stated American policy in terms of the protecting the hemisphere and not tolerating narco trafficking and all of the things that the Maduro regime has been complicit in. I think it tells China and Russia that the president's willing to use force where necessary in a surgical way, judiciously, to preserve the international order.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your insight. I appreciate it. That's Alexander Gray, former Deputy Assistant to the President and Chief of Staff of the White House National Security Council.